Intellectual life in Western and Northern Europe has been overtaken by pseudo intellectualism, political correctness, and emotional manipulation. Today I'm going to show you another one of these pseudo intellectuals who are the product of a broken world of academe in Western Europe, and perhaps even in the Western world as a whole. In my previous video I mentioned that these people's minds basically operate on several concepts that they've internalized, among which cultural and moral relativism, a sense of guilt and a willingness to engage in self-sacrifice, and a Marxist lens in which distinction between oppressors and oppressed is made. I also mentioned that these people basically lack certain important knowledge that they actually should possess given the topics that they can be seen and heard talking about and given their credentials. They lack a deep understanding of the concept of a Western nation state as a vehicle for the right to self-determination of a Western people, a deep understanding of how and why cultures can be totally different from one another, and a deep understanding of the long-term historical timelines and processes. The presence of these unconscious concepts, together with the lack of knowledge on important topics, are what make them talk in the way they talk, about the issues that they wouldn't talk about in that specific way, might they have received proper education. So the specific intellectual fraud I'm going to discuss in this video is a legal philosopher who studied at 3 different universities in London, New York, and Montreal. And she's quite popular in the Netherlands in the sense that she does get invited to quite some talk shows, radio shows, and occasionally publishes articles in several mainstream newspapers. So you would think that this lady must be pretty knowledgeable and really understands the topic that she talks about. Well, let's take a look.
Wat zegt de wetenschap daarover?
Als je kijkt naar de rechtvaardigheidstheorieën, zoals wij die in de westerse wereld hebben gecreëerd, liberaal-democratische rechtvaardigheidstheorieën, dan zien we dat deze theorieën eigenlijk uitgaan van de gelijkwaardigheid van alle mensen. Dus op het moment dat iemand, een filosoof, een boek schrijft en hij schrijft: ik begin met de assumptie dat niet alle mensen gelijk zijn, dan schrijven we hem eigenlijk al meteen af. Maar tegelijkertijd zeggen we: alle mensen zijn gelijk, maar deze en deze instituties en deze wetten gelden alleen voor een groep burgers. Maar er wordt eigenlijk nooit uitgelegd hoe zo'n theorie dus begint met de gelijkwaardigheid van alle mensen, om vervolgens gelijke rechten te geven aan alleen een selecte groep. Ik mag hier in Nederland leven. Ik mag hier gewoon zijn. Ik mag ook op het moment dat ik in Turkije zou zijn, zou ik ieder mogelijk moment terug mogen reizen. Maar tegen iemand van mijn leeftijd, een vrouw van mijn leeftijd uit Syrië, zeggen we geven u geen visum en u mag ook niet reizen naar Europa toe. En ik denk dat in de huidige wereld, waar je dus inderdaad met staten hebt, met selecte groepen burgers, en je ziet dat in bepaalde landen veel meer welvaart is, veel meer veiligheid is, en het dus verboden is voor mensen om te reizen, zich te bewegen van het ene land naar het andere land, je eigenlijk niet anders kan stellen dan dat we in een geboorteloterij leven.
Okay, so people are all equal, but laws and rights are only for a select group of citizens of a nation state. This is unfair. Now this is the type of argument that you would expect from somebody who walks around at some therapy group, and not from somebody who walks around at a university. Here you can clearly see that she lacks a deep understanding of the concept of the Western nation state as a vehicle for the right to self-determination of a population. For example, the Japanese people who are living in a nation state called Japan have to adhere to certain laws and are granted certain rights that only apply to the Japanese and to some other people who have been admitted entry to the Japanese nation state. These laws and rights do not apply to the people in Thailand, and this also works vice versa. The people in Japan do not have to adhere to the laws that apply in Thailand and are not granted any rights all the way from Thailand. The Japanese nation state is a product of the Japanese people, who are the owner of their nation state and who determine the direction that their nation state moves in, by exercising their right to self-determination by voting whenever there is an election. Now, is it unfair that the people in Thailand have a lower quality of life than the people in Japan? Well, yeah, you can think it is unfair. Or you can think of it as the result of the hard work of the ancestors of the Japanese, and the fact that they have a highly disciplined culture. But would the solution be to allow the people who live in Thailand to move to Japan in order to create equality? Well, no, because this would be unfair to the Japanese. The fact that they are living the way they live is because they have reached a certain level of civilization and success. Slowly building this up towards the level that it is at now has been a hard and slow process that has been accomplished by the ancestors of the Japanese, who passed on their civilization that is Japan to their children, and they did the same and passed it on to their children, and so on. And if you go even deeper than that, you will find out that the fact that this process has even been made possible is based on historical processes that go back even further. The history of Japanese civilization, their writings, their technological accomplishments, their philosophical concepts that are now ingrained into the collective psychology of the Japanese, their historic heritage. All of these things led to the nation state that they have now, including the laws that they have to adhere to and the rights that they've given themselves within their nation state. And this belongs to the Japanese and not to the Thais. And in the future it will belong to the children and grandchildren of the Japanese. So by acting as if the laws and rights that apply within a single nation state should belong to the people who are outside of this nation state and even outside of the larger civilization that this nation state is a part of, this lady is crossing quite some mental borders that she wouldn't have crossed might she have received actual education on this topic. You can even turn her story around and suggest that the laws and rights that apply within a country like Thailand should also apply to the people in Japan, because otherwise it wouldn't be equal.
En ik denk dat in de huidige wereld, waar je dus inderdaad met staten hebt, met selecte groepen burgers.
By the way in which she said this, she betrays her lack of knowledge about this topic. Because of course a nation state has a select group of citizens. Because this select group of people are the people of which the nation state is their territory, which allows them to live there according to their standards and rules. Duh. Anyway, she talks about the theories of justice that have been created by Western philosophers, and then doesn't only suggest that these theories should ideally apply to all people on the entire planet, which indeed would be nice in the ideal situation, but then suggests that it is our responsibility to make sure that these theories are applied to all people in the entire world. She does not take into consideration the fact that cultures can be incredibly, dramatically, mind-blowingly different from one another, and that the theories of justice that she is talking about are created by a civilization that first needed to reach a certain level of sophistication in order to be able to produce these theories of justice in the first place. There are cultures in the world that reject the foundation upon which this level of sophistication that led to these theories of justice is built. And it has already been shown and proven that these cultures are unable or unwilling to live up to the same level of civilization that the West has reached. So yeah, the world is a very big place. There are many cultures in the world. Who would have thought? In addition, what she is suggesting is impossible because of the following very simple reason. The land surface of Europe is 10.18 million square kilometer, with a population of 741.4 million in 2016. The land surface of Africa is 30.37 million square kilometers, with a total population of 1.216 billion. The land surface of the entire planet is 510.1 million square kilometer, and is estimated to have reached 7.6 billion people in May of 2018. The idea that Europe can guarantee that all of Africa or even the entire world has the same rights, firstly, is impossible, and secondly, is not our responsibility. And thirdly, even allowing a small percentage of Africa to come to Europe will end civilization in Europe. You can already see the terrible effects of only 5% of the population of the United Kingdom that is Muslim on the safety for young white British girls. Massive influx of people from totally different cultures historically has always led to massive problems. Why doesn't this lady know this? So is it moral to throw away hundreds of years of civilizational developments and hard work by your own ancestors, from whom you received all this, just to create equality? Of course not. This is something that only a radical extremist would suggest. It is not moral at all to burden your own children with massive problems and perhaps even with a civil war.
Wat zegt de wetenschap daarover?
Nou ja, als ik
This lady mentioned that some countries are more prosperous and safe. Why does she think this is the case in the first place? What's also quite interesting is that if it wasn't for the work of her own ancestors who passed this civilization on to her, it wouldn't have been possible for her to be standing there making these uneducated remarks in the first place, without being physically attacked or even raped by a group of angry people. This is actually an extremely good thing, but I don't think that she realizes this and that she understands how exceptional the position that she's in actually is, if you look at a couple of thousands of years of human history, and if you look at how things are today in the Middle East and in Africa. So here you have it, another Dutch pseudo-intellectual. And again, these are the type of people who get invited to talk shows and who are then presented by these talk shows as people who have authority on the topics that they talk about. Around the time that they start talking, they show a little header in the screen, with which they present them as quote-unquote experts, doctors of such and such. Hey viewer at home, you should really listen to this person because this person studied at a university, so he or she truly knows what he or she is talking about. Well, no, not at all.
Wat zegt de wetenschap daarover?
Nou ja, als ik...
The influence that these type of intellectual frauds have on the mainstream culture should not be underestimated. I recommend that you take a look at the website of this lady. I included a link to the Google translated version of it in the description. Most people's opinions are influenced by these type of people, and that is a huge problem. The horribly bad state of the academic world if it comes to areas of study related to culture, philosophy, history and morality is a huge problem that we have in Western and Northern Europe, and perhaps even in the Western world as a whole. And we better start talking about it openly, because it has to be solved. Anyway, thanks for watching and listening. If you like the type of videos that I make, please consider subscribing to my channel by clicking on the big red button. Also do not forget to click to receive a notification whenever I upload another video, or consider becoming a patron. Information can be found in the description below this video. See you next time.